Okay, hello everyone. I wanted to do a short video to kind of kick off Unit 8. You should be wrapping up Unit 7. The Unit 7 test is slotted for April 15th, which is Tuesday. And then you will get started into Unit 8 on Wednesday, which is thermal energy and thermodynamics. So I wanted to touch a little bit on thermal energy today. So thermal energy is the total amount of kinetic energy of every particle in a substance. If you guys remember, kinetic energy is the energy of motion. So that means these particles that make up whatever substance we're talking about are constantly in motion. So thermal energy is the sum of all the kinetic energies of all of the particles in a substance. So temperature is a measure of the average amount of kinetic energy between the particles of whatever piece of matter we're talking about. So when you take the temperature of something, you're actually taking the average amount of kinetic energy of those moving particles. And our last term is heat. So heat is thermal energy that's transferred between substances. So in the morning when my office is really cold, I'm drinking a hot cup of coffee and I put my hands around that cup of coffee, and thermal energy from my coffee is transferred into my hands. So we would consider that to be heat. Okay, so I want to talk about the three methods of heat transfer. So again, heat is thermal energy transferred between substances. So the three methods of heat transfer, you might be familiar with this, is conduction, convection, and radiation. So this is basically the movement of thermal energy from one object to another. So conduction is the transfer of thermal energy when particles collide in matter. Objects must be touching each other. So I'm going to go back to my cup of coffee. So when my coffee is hot and my hands are cold and my hands are wrapped around my cup of coffee, that thermal energy moves from my coffee into my hands through conduction. So transfer of thermal energy when particles in matter collide. Also, like if you were to not realize your stove is hot and you walked over there and you accidentally put your hand on the stove, and the heat from the stove is transferred to your hand and burns you, that's conduction. Convection is the transfer of thermal energy from hot to cold places by air or liquid. So liquids are actually liquids are gases. Let me start over. Convection, transfer of thermal energy from hot to cold places by gases or by liquids. Sometimes gases and liquids are called fluids. That's what I was trying to get at. So convection is like you've got this constant movement in a liquid or in a gas from warm areas to cold areas. So I like this picture for convection, and I do feel like sometimes it's easier with a picture. So convection, if you've got a pot of boiling water, the water on the bottom is going to get warm and it is going to rise to the top. So all that thermal energy is going to move to the top, and then it's going to hit the air and get cold. And then those water molecules that are colder will be more dense and will sink to the bottom. And then they'll get warmed up by the heat source. And so this heat is being transferred around and around, okay? They're called convection currents in water. This also happens in air. So this picture over here, the burning wood, we've got all types of heat transfer here. Conduction, so energy transferred by direct contact. So this stick is going to, or whatever he's holding, is going to warm up, and then heat will be transferred from the stick to his hand. Convection, okay, we've got this rising of the heat energy from the fire or the wood into the air, and it will kind of make these convection currents up here. So our last one is radiation. This is energy transfer that occurs by electromagnetic waves. If you remember the electromagnetic spectrum, there are 7 different types of electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic radiation. Microwaves, UV rays, infrared rays, gamma rays, X-rays. That's all electromagnetic waves. So radiation is going to be energy, thermal energy transfer that occurs by electromagnetic waves. Okay, so that was just a quick, brief run through. I do want to show you one quick little animation over this, and we'll do a quick practice, and I'll let you guys go. Okay, here we go.
Welcome to heat transfer, conduction, radiation, convection. Heat transfers throughout our environment all the time. Wherever you are aware of things that are warm or cool or are getting warmer or cooler. Dive into a swimming pool or walk on the sidewalk barefoot in the summer, and you know about heat transfer. In our environment, heat transfer is always from the hotter object to the colder object. Heat transfers to and through some materials better than others. In this lesson, you will learn about the 3 ways that heat transfers in our environment: convection, conduction, and radiation. Conduction is the transfer of heat between substances that are in direct contact with each other. The better the conductor, the more rapidly heat will transfer.
So what substances do you think would be good conductors or poor conductors? So metals are good conductors: copper, silver, iron, and steel. Poor conductors or good insulators would be wood, styrofoam, paper, and air. So good conductors, that means that heat can transfer through the material very easily. Poor conductors or insulators mean that it is very hard for heat to transfer through those substances. Okay. Convection.
Convection is the up and down movement of gases and liquids caused by heat transfer. As a gas or a liquid is heated, it warms, expands, and rises because it is less dense. When the gas or liquid cools, it becomes more dense and falls. As the gas or liquid warms and rises, or cools and falls, it creates a convection current. Convection is the primary method by which heat moves through gases and liquids.
That's a good example of a convection current. It says, can you think of other examples of convection? Wind currents. Ooh, hot air balloon, that's a good one. Lower floors of a building being cooler than the top floor, absolutely. Warm air rises, cool air drops or descends. That's why my basement is way cooler than my upstairs. Okay. Let's look at the last one, which is radiation.
When electromagnetic waves travel through space, it is called radiation. When electromagnetic waves come in contact with an object, the waves transfer the heat to that object. Electromagnetic waves travel through empty space. The sun warms the earth through the radiation of electromagnetic waves. You have completed this learning activity: heat transfer, conduction, radiation, convection.
I think that is a great example of those three methods of heat transfer. Okay, so before we say goodbye, I want to do just a quick check here. So it says determine which type of heat transfer: conduction, convection, radiation. Again, conduction is heat transfer or thermal energy that's transferred between objects that are touching. So this is due to the movement of particles. Convection is the movement of heat or thermal energy by convection currents in gases and liquids. And radiation is the transfer of electromagnetic waves, which transfers energy from one object to another. So eggs cooking in a frying pan. The eggs are actually touching the frying pan, which is on the stove. So I'm going to say conduction on that one. Sun tanning by the swimming pool. We could have done that on Sunday. It was so warm on Sunday. Hopefully you were outside and you could feel the heat beating down on you. And that's from radiation. So those UV rays, which are invisible, were reaching you through radiation. Water boiling inside a tea kettle. We drink a lot of tea at my house because my husband's Irish. And so when we turn the tea kettle on, we put it on fill it up with water, we put it on the stove, and the water on the bottom of the tea kettle inside gets warm, and then the heat rises to the top, and then the water gets colder and then drops down to the bottom, and the heat is constantly moving in these convection currents. So that's going to be convection. Burning your hand on a hot cake pan. We're going to say conduction on there because your hand is touching the pan. Snowman melting from the sun. Again, those UV rays that are coming from the sun through electromagnetic waves to melt the snowman. So that's radiation. And cooking your food in the microwave. If you remember, microwaves are one of the 7 different types of electromagnetic radiation. So that is going to be radiation. And that is heat transfer. I will do a video on specific heat and post that as well. Hope you guys have a great day.